Hi everyone, my name is Dana, and today we are having our fourth and final session in our Azure security series, and we'll be talking about how to securely connect to your Azure resources. We have Wim with us as always, and I'm sure he'll be showing us amazing slides, and he'll be explaining. So take it away, Wim.
Okay, thank you, Dana. So hello everyone, and welcome to the final session in the Cloud Lunch and Learn Azure Security Series. Today's session is titled Securely Connect to Your Azure Resources. And before we begin, I first want to thank Dana and Hugo and the other members of the Cloud Lunch and Learn team for setting up this concept and for inviting me to deliver these talks around securing your Azure environment. Let me also share a little bit about myself. My name is Wim. I live in Belgium, where I work as a cloud architect. Next to that, I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, so I also deliver all kinds of Azure trainings. Community-wise, I'm a founding board member of a Belgium user group called MC2MC. I also have my own blog, https://wimmatthijssen.com, where I blog a lot about my daily experiences with Azure and all related Microsoft hybrid cloud services. Since July of this year, I'm also awarded as a Microsoft Azure MVP. So for me, that was a really great honor and still is. And like most IT professionals these days, I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, just want to say hi or ask a question about Azure or Azure security, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle @wmatthijssen or through LinkedIn. So on the agenda today, first, a short intro where I will tell you all about why securely connecting to your Azure resources for management purposes is that important. Then I will look into the Azure Toolbox, looking at all portals, services, resources, and apps you can use to safely manage your Azure resources. Then I will look at all the common VM administrative access methods, the different ways, the good and the bad ones, and how you can connect to your Azure IaaS VMs. Then I will talk about what Azure Bastion is and dig a little deeper in how to use and deploy it. And I will also look at how virtual network service endpoint and Azure Private Link can help you to secure your virtual networks and Azure services. At the end of the session, I will go through the key takeaways where we'll focus on the things you should really remember about this session. And totally at the end, we probably will still have some time for a Q&A, where I would love to answer any of your questions. You can always ask your questions afterwards, after the session, via my Twitter handle or during the session in the chat, and Dana will follow them up. So first question we can ask ourselves is why securely connecting to your Azure resources for management purposes is that important, and this to keep your cloud or hybrid cloud environment safe and secure. Well, these days, most companies are in a form of state of digital transformation, where they try to adapt digital technology to transform services or businesses through replacing non-digital or manual processes with digital processes, or replacing older technologies with newer technologies. Today, a lot of those companies are using the Microsoft Cloud ecosystem to help them in their digital transformation journey, not only to work more efficiently and to improve their productivity, but also to help them define a clear vision and strategy to develop a strong roadmap, which helps them move forward. So they can better serve their customers in new ways and find solutions to once unsolvable business or other problems. But those new ways of working and new types of resources also require them to bring their security and the way they connect to and manage all those new resources to another level. So, and this because these days, those companies and especially their data and resources has become a target to a bunch of different types of attacks. Where attackers or hackers use existing techniques like, for example, social engineering, where an attacker tries to manipulate someone to give up confidential information, or they use ransomware like WannaCrypt, for example, which is a kind of malware which encrypts a company's files or data, after which then the attacker demands a ransom to the company to restore access to the data. But there are also some new techniques attackers or hackers use, like acquire Azure tenant keys from GitHub, or where an attacker tries to get into an Azure VM by use of brute force or RDP SSH password spray attacks. And that's really why securely connecting to your Azure resources is that important, because this will help your company to have a stronger security posture. So nowadays, you already have a lot of ways to securely manage your Azure resources. So let us first take a look at what you can put into your Azure toolbox these days. So first of all, you have the Azure portal. You just need to open a browser and go to portal.azure.com, sign in with a Microsoft account or your corporate account with specific rights, and you can do all tasks with Azure resources which you're allowed to do. Next to the Azure portal, you also have some specific portals, like, for example, the Azure Active Directory Admin Center, which you use if you only want to work with Azure AD. So if you open that specific portal, only Azure AD related resources will be available, and you won't be seeing all other resources. So if you want to work with your cloud identities, that's probably a portal you want to use. You also have the preview portal, which will allow you to work with services still in preview or in beta. And Ignite is just a day closed, so there are a lot of those new things you can now test out. So I would say go take a look at the preview portal and try all new stuff out. Then you also have the Azure mobile app, which you can manage your Azure environment from your iPhone or Android, and which can help you to do management-related tasks when you're, for example, on the road. You can, for example, start and stop VMs, and the app itself is available in the App Store and in Google Play. You also have the Azure Portal app. So you can connect to the Azure portal without the need for a browser. A good use case is, for example, when you work with the Windows Server 2019 management server, it's best not to use a browser on any server to do management-related tasks. So you can just install the app and manage your Azure resources from there without you needing to open a browser on your server. And the look and feel is completely the same as when you were working from inside the Azure portal. So then I think I use almost every day the Azure Cloud Shell. Azure Cloud Shell is a browser-based shell experience to manage and develop Azure resources. Users can choose between Bash or PowerShell, and you can use a Cloud Shell in several ways, via direct link https://shell.azure.com, through the Azure portal directly, or via Windows Terminal or Visual Studio Code. Or, for example, when you use docs.microsoft.com or even Microsoft Learn, just select the try it button next to all the codes, the Azure CLI code and Azure PowerShell code snippets on a page, and you probably can directly test it out through Cloud Shell. In the back, it requires a resource group, a storage account, and an Azure file share. And it's temporary and provided on a per session per user basis, but there's a persistent file share for each user. A thing you should really keep in mind that it terminates after 20 minutes of inactivity. So try it out. It's a good way to manage your Azure resources. Then you also have Visual Studio Code, which I think probably a lot of you are already using. But for those who don't, Visual Studio Code is a free source code editor made by Microsoft, and which can be used on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Some of the features included are support for debugging, syntax highlighting, and intelligent code completion. And you can work with your Azure resources directly from inside Visual Studio Code through extensions. And you can even use Cloud Shell with it. So I think I already mentioned that on the previous slide. And for example, by using either in Visual Studio Code, the Azure CLI or the Azure App Services extension, you can have an application running in, let us say, a few minutes. And there are many VS Code extensions available on the marketplace related to Azure, which make it easy to build and host applications in Azure. So yeah, go look them out also. Next to Visual Studio Code, you also, these days, you have Windows Terminal. Windows Terminal is a modern terminal application for Windows 10. It's created for users of command line tools and shells like Command Prompt, PowerShell, and Windows Subsystem for Linux, the WSL. Its main features include multiple tabs, panes, Unicode, UTF-8 character support. And a nice thing is that you have the ability to create your own themes and customize text, colors, backgrounds, and shortcuts. So you can optimize it whatever way you want it. You can download Windows Terminal from the Microsoft Store, or you can, it's an open source project. You can also download it from GitHub. The link is on the slide, by the way. So let me drink a little bit. These days, there are also some different ways in which you can automate repetitive tasks. First of all, you can use Azure PowerShell scripts or ARM templates, which use the JSON language as syntax. I know there is some learning curve to start using ARM templates because of its complexity, but there are some easy ways you can create an ARM starter template if you're not that familiar with them. For example, you can use the Azure portal to create a template based on the resources in an existing resource group, which you created in advance through the Azure portal itself. Or you can start with an Azure Quick Start template. Quick tip I also want to mention is that you can, inside Visual Studio Code, you can use Visual Studio Code's Azure Resource Manager Tools extension, which is especially designed for creating templates. And this extension will make it easier to navigate in your template code and provides, for example, auto-completion for many common tasks. So you start typing in your code and your ARM templates in JSON, it will fill it up, the words by itself. A nice other feature is you can also visualize your template with the Azure Resource Manager Visualizer. You should definitely check that one out if you download something from the Quick Start gallery and you want to see how this will look like in your Azure environment. It will make a fine drawing of the template and will really show it to you in a visualized way. Of course, for management and automation tasks, you can also use these days Azure Automation, which is a cloud-based automation and configuration service that supports consistent management across Azure and even your non-Azure environments. It comprises process automation, configuration management, and also Azure Update Management. With Azure Automation, you can get complete control during deployments and management operations, whatever you want to perform in Azure. So my tip, if you do it often, automate it. For working with Azure Storage, there are also some tools you can use. First of all, you can use the Azure Storage Explorer, which is an application that helps you to easily access your Azure storage accounts, and this from any device or any platform, be it Windows, macOS, or Linux. It allows you to easily connect to your subscription and work with all your tables, blobs, queues, and even Azure file shares. And if you don't want to install the app, you can also use the Storage Explorer. It's still in preview directly from inside the Azure portal. Next to Storage Explorer, you can also use AskCopy. It's currently version 10, which is a command line utility that you can use to copy blobs or files to or from a storage account. You could compare it to, let us say, RoboCopy for Azure storage. And let me now tell you a little bit about Windows Admin Center. probably also a little bit familiar to some of you. Windows Admin Center is a locally deployed browser-based app for managing Windows servers, clusters, hyper-converged infrastructures, and even Windows 10 PCs. It simplifies your server management and helps you to connect to your Windows services and to help to connect your Windows service to hybrid services, Azure hybrid services, like, for example, Azure Backup, Azure Site Recovery, and Azure File Sync. You can install it on a Windows 10, Windows Server semi-annual channel server, or on Windows Server 2016, or on Windows Server 2019, whatever where you want to deploy it, it's available for every one of those. If you want to use it, you can download it from the Microsoft Evaluation Center. It's an app I mostly use these days to do any kind of server management. So I would also say try that one out if you're not already using it. And then, of course, you also have Azure Arc, which is GA, went GA during Ignite. Azure Arc enables deployment of Azure services anywhere and extends your Azure management to any infrastructure, including other clouds like AWS and Google Cloud. It kind of extends your Azure management, like I said, to any infrastructure. It enables you to manage your entire environment, and this from a single pane of glass, and this by projecting your existing resources into the Azure Resource Manager model. Nowadays, you can manage virtual machines, Kubernetes clusters, and databases, and this as if they were running in Azure itself. So definitely go try that out also. So I think it's now time for my first demo. So let me open my Azure portal. Here it is. So you can see I'm already logged in. The thing I want to show you, for example, if you want to use the Storage Explorer directly from inside the Azure portal, just go to your storage accounts, choose a specific storage accounts. Let us say this one. You can see Storage Explorer over here. You can see it's also in a preview at the moment. Just click on it. For example, this one has a file share. Click on the file share. And for example, you can check upload. You can select the file from over here. Let us say this JPEG. I want to upload it. Just click on open. It already exists. We choose the override one. Upload it. You can see it's there. And the nice thing, and if you want to use that specific JPEG inside from Cloud Shell, for example, just click on the button over here. This will open Cloud Shell. We'll wait for it for a minute. It wouldn't take that long. It's authenticating to Azure, building my Azure drive in the back. So for example, you can use your familiar command prompt commands. For example, if you do dir, you can see I have a Cloud Tower and Azure deploy JSON. If you do, for example, cd, wait, I will scroll this one a little bit up so it shows better. Yeah, that's true. Now it's gone completely. Let me pull it up. Okay, now it's completely gone. Wait. Okay, there it is. So let us choose CD Cloud Shell, for example. We go into Cloud tab. If you see there, you can see that specific JPEG is over there. From over here to show you, Microsoft is really loving Linux. Cloud Shell in the back runs on Linux and on Ubuntu. So you can see they really love Linux these days. You can, in the PowerShell window, can use every PowerShell command you know. For example, get date. You can even do numeric transformations. You can switch to Bash. Just type in Bash. You can exit this one. You can open Visual Studio Code just by opening code. Let's also exit this one. I mostly use it from over here because then I have a full window, and that's through the shell.azure.com. So I'm already logged in. For example, if I want to show all my VMs, you can directly do it and it shows. The nice thing is, for example, I have a Windows terminal. Let me show it over here. You can see I can, in a tabbed view, open Windows PowerShell. I can open my command prompt, and I can even open a Cloud Shell. I'm not already logged in, so I need to go to this specific website, give in this code, and then it will connect to my Cloud Shell, and I can do exactly the same like I'm doing over here, but this directly inside from Windows Terminal, and this next to my other opened windows. I can use command prompt and Windows PowerShell tab next to each other. So that's my first demo. Let me go back to the slides. So after that first demo, let us now take a look at some common VM administrative access methods. So like probably most of you know, the easiest way, but the least secure one to connect to an Azure VM is by using its public IP address, its PIP. And this way you can connect to the VM through RAP or SSH, depending if the VM is a Windows or a Linux VM. If you're using an NSG for the specific VM subnet in which those VMs are living, you should also allow TCP port 3389 and TCP port 22 to get it working. This kind of connecting to your Azure VMs is good for studying purposes or when you need to do a quick test, but you should never mark why it works. Use it in a production environment, because by using this way to connect to your VMs, one or both management ports will be widely opened on the internet. And in this way, your VM can be easily attacked, like for in this example, by orcs. Another way to connect to your EAS VMs is by placing them behind an Azure external load balancer. Instead of the VM, the external load balancer then uses the public IP address, and you also connect to it through RDP or SSH over the public internet. The external load balancer then redirects your connection to the VM behind it. I already saw this method being used by some customers, I think one or twice, but it's a kind of security through obscurity, like they say, because one or both management ports are still opened on the internet, only now there is an external load balancer in front of them. Again, not a really good method to connect to your EAS VMs in any production environment. And this because in both ways, you can't prevent breaches. This because attackers commonly target those open management ports on the internet-facing VMs, spanning from brute force attacks or DDoS attacks, and even do port scans. And for example, in case of a successful brute force attack, an attacker can compromise your VM and from there establish a foothold into your environment. And from there do whatever they want to do, or gather whatever data they want to gather. If you opened one of both management ports in your NSG for your VM subnet, for example, if it's RDP or SSH, you will see that in the name field, the rule name is preceded by a hazard triangle with an exclamation mark telling you that there is a security risk by opening these ports to the internet. So Microsoft is already informing you that this probably isn't a good security idea to do it in this way. And also, if you open Azure Security Center under your resource health hygiene, you will see also a security recommendation that both management ports should be closed on those virtual machines. And as a quick fix, Azure Security Center will recommend to enable JIT for those VMs, but that's something I will talk a little bit later about. So then, how can you connect to your Azure VMs in a high secure way, like they say? First of all, by using a site-to-site VPN or an EXPRESSROUTE. And in this way, you can connect from your on-premises network to the private IP address of the VM. Next to those two options, you can also use a point-to-site VPN and to set up a secure connection to any VNet from an individual computer. With a point-to-site VPN, you can use certificate-based authentication or radius, but you also have the option to use the Open VPN protocol and even use Azure Active Directory authentication instead of using a self-signed certificate. A resource we also still see being deployed a lot in Azure environments is a jump box or a jump host or a jump server, like some people like to name it. For people who don't know it, jump box is a server on a network, in this case in Azure, which is used to access other devices in a separate security zone or in one of the spoke VNets if you're working in a hub-spoke model. It's a control entry point into your Azure environment, set up in a separated VNet or subnet, like management VNet or subnet, which improves the overall security and reduces the attack surface of your VMs. You kind of jump from that VM to your other VMs. To allow access from the internet, this VM also uses a PIP, and most of the times it's deployed as a very small Linux VM. So you kind of tunnel your RDP connections through SSH. And I even saw some customers using an RES gateway as a small VM, and by this tunnel an RDP connection through SSL. So a jump box is a good alternative for a secure connection, but yet it's another resource for you to keep updated and backed up, and you also need to troubleshoot it when it fails. And if you, for example, want to foresee high availability, you should at least have 2 of jump boxes deployed, which brings the price up. So that in case of when one is down, you still have access to a second one, which you can use to connect to your spoke VMs. So a way to protect your jump box with a PIP, and also another option to more securely connect to your EAS VMs, is with just-in-time VM access, or JIT. JIT enables you to lock down your VMs at the network level by blocking inbound traffic to specific management ports like RDP or SSH, and limit the amount of time that those management ports are open, and this for a maximum of 24 hours. In this way, it enables you to control the access and reduce the attack surface to your EAS VMs. If you want to use JIT, just also keep that one in mind. You need to enable the standard tier of Azure Security Center. You should also keep in mind that it only supports Azure Resource Manager VMs, so no classic ASM VM support for everyone who's still running those. How does JIT work? Well, first of all, a user, not me, for example, needs to request access to a VM. Then Security Center checks if that user has role-based access permissions for that VM. If so, that request is approved, and then Security Center automatically configures the NSG, and this to allow inbound traffic to the necessary ports, and this for the requested amount of time. When the time is passed, Security Center restores the NSG back to its previous states and will disable the connection. And a nice feature is that all of those requests can be reviewed in the activity log. So you can follow up and check who has access and when. So let me quickly show it in a second demo. Let me go back to the Azure portal. Yeah, I will close my Windows terminal, close all. I go back to the, we'll also close the Cloud Shell overview. So I have some virtual machines running in my environment. Let me choose this one. You can see this one has a public IP address. If I want to connect to it for studying purposes, not for production purposes, just click on connect. It's a Windows VM, so I need to choose RDP. Just click on RDP. It's already saying if you want to use it this way, it's better to enable just-in-time VM access. You just can download the RDP file. I already downloaded it twice, I think. You can just open the file. You click on connect, just like you did before. You fill in your super secret password. And then your VM is connected. Let me slide. And I'm connected to my VM. That's a good way to do it when you're studying, for example, or do you need to do a quick test. But if you go to the network security group, This VM is part of my web environment, so it's in my web subnet. If I show you this one, you would see I allowed 3389 and 22, but Microsoft is telling me it's probably not a good idea, so you can do this one better. So a better way to connect to those, for example, let us say I have a VM. This one, for example, let us say it's a Jumpbox. If I click on it, this one is protected with just-in-time VM access. You just need to connect. You can see this one also, it's a wrong one. Yeah, okay, let me do this one. You click on the RDP. You can see it's a little bit different because you first need to request access. Click on request access. It's requesting just-in-time access for that specific few minutes. And then you once again download the RDP file. Yeah, you probably need to wait 30 seconds, but and you can do the same thing. You can connect. It's connecting, and you can type in your password. And now I'm also connected on the public IP address, but this time with the use of JIT. So probably I'm allowed for 2 hours, for example. If you want to check your JIT, just go into a security center. The view is changed since last week. So normally it was somewhere at the bottom over here because just could select JIT. Now you need to go to Azure Defender. Let it load for a minute. Go to the bottom, click on just-in-time VM access. You can see for that specific VM, I had 2 requests. I already made one earlier today. One is active now. It's for that specific port. If you click on over here, you can check the activity log. If you want to edit it, you can also click on edit and you can add extra ports or whatever you want to do. You can also change the time. Can go up to 24 hours, like I said. So it's a good way to do it. You can also see all those VMs are not configured. This one has a pip, so probably it's high, severity is high, so I probably need to apply JIT to these ones. If you want to do it, you can do it in bulk. Just click enable JIT on VMs and go to the process. That's easy how it is, but keep in mind for JIT you need to pay because you're using the standard tier of Azure Security Center. So let me go back to my slides. So after a second demo, let us now take a look at Azure Bastion. What is Azure Bastion? If you look at the definition, Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you provision inside your virtual network. It provides secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your virtual machines directly in the Azure portal over SSL. If we split up this definition, you could say that Azure Bastion is a fully managed PaaS service. You could see it as a Jumpbox as a service provisioned directly into a VNet, which provides secure and seamless RDP and SSH access to all your Azure virtual machines in that specific VNet, and this directly from the Azure portal, so through SSL. When you use Bastion, your VMs themselves do not need a pip to connect to them, and you also do not require any RDP or SSH client on your device from which you're connecting. It's completely clientless. Bastion is a kind of a single hardened access point, and in the back it's built up by a VM scale set. And it will protect your EAS VMs from port scanning, zero-day exploits, and even malware targeting. How does Azure Bastion work? Bastion lives in its own subnet, the Azure Bastion subnet in a VNet, which exposes only port 443 SSL to the internet. And through your Bastion host, you connect with RDP on port 3389 or SSH on port 22 to the private IP address of your VMs. And in this way, your VM itself does not need a pip to be able to connect to it. A thing you should really keep in mind is that you need to deploy a Bastion host in every VNet. And if you want to be able to connect to the Azure VMs running in those VNets, And this because at the moment, the Azure Bastion service does not support VNet peering. There are several use cases for Azure Bastion. The first one is when there is no site-to-site VPN or point-to-site VPN or EXPRESSROUTE available, and you need to be able to securely connect to your Azure VMs. For example, in a cloud-only environment. Another one is when a jump box does not fit the requirements. Maybe because port 3389 is not allowed, or the use of a jump box or jump boxes is more expensive because you need to set it up in a high available way to have a specific SLA or for compliance reasons. Another reason can be if the customer has a hard requirement to use HTTPS to connect on port 443, or the customer requires a PaaS solution for security reasons or for compliance reasons. It could also be that you need a solution to foresee access to your Azure VMs, which is easily and quickly to deploy and to remove. And yeah, with the use of Azure PowerShell or CLI, you can set up a Bastion host within, I think 5 minutes and remove it again after all the work is done. And the final use case is when you need to foresee temporary access to all of your VM and nothing else in the resource group or VNet. For example, then you can combine the Azure Bastion with it, and use it in that way. If you look at the pricing, a Bastion host in the West Europe region costs around 116.97 euros for the host itself. But you should keep in mind that you also need to pay for all outbound data transfers. The first 5 gigs are free, which I think for most small and medium customers will be more than enough. Pricing is different for a bigger amount of outbound data transfers. And if you're over 500 terabytes each month, probably if you're a big enterprise, then you should contact the Azure sales for special pricing. And you should also keep in mind that prices also can be different depending in the zone where you're deploying your Bastion host. For the moment, you have 2 zones. One covers West Europe and almost all US. And zone 2 cover Australia East, Japan East, and all other regions in the East. Let us now take a deeper look on how you can deploy an Azure Bastion host. It's best that before you start with your deployment, you check if the Azure Bastion service is available in your region. In the Europe regions, there shouldn't be any problem, but there are some regions where the service isn't available. Then you also need to look at your governance strategy that's in place, or if you have a specific Azure governance plan you need to follow. And you especially need to follow it, especially for the naming of the Bastion host and for the use of the necessary resource tags. For people who don't know, with resource tags, you can add extra metadata to any Azure resource. A tag itself always exists of a name and a value. For example, a good tag to use in combination with Azure Bastion is one that describes the VNet. In this way, you can easily find in which VNet the Bastion host is available to use. Then before you start deploying your Bastion host, you can already create the specific subnet in your VNet. This subnet always needs to have the name Azure Bastion subnet and should be at least /27 or larger. Also check if you have the necessary address space available in your VNet, because the thing we see a lot in environments is that the complete address space is already used by other subnets, and then you can't deploy Bastion before changing the VNet address space, but in most cases, is not directly possible. If you already protect that subnet with an NSG, you should also see that all necessary inbound and outbound rules are in place to allow the necessary access on the needed ports. Otherwise, the Bastion deployment will fail. You should also keep in mind for people who are using Azure Firewall or any other network virtual appliance that you don't associate the Azure Bastion subnet in the route table Otherwise, you will end up with blocking traffic required for Azure Bastion to work. Then the Bastion host itself requires a public IP. If you also create this one in advance, you should use the standard public IP SKU, and then you can finally create the Azure Bastion host using the Azure portal, Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI, or via the use of an ARM template. Like I already said in the previous slide, to harden the subnet used by the Azure Bastion host, you can use a network security group or an NSG, like they say, to only allow the necessary. You should only allow the necessary inbound and outbound traffic. On the Azure Bastion subnet, you should allow TCP traffic on port 443 from Service Stack Internet, and also TCP traffic on port 443 and 4443 from the Service Stack Gateway Manager to allow all management traffic. And then you can deny all other traffic with a priority of 900. As outbound rules, on the same Azure Bastion subnet, you should allow TCP traffic on port 3389 and 22 to the Service Stack virtual network, and this to allow management on your VMs in the different subnets of the VNet. You should also try allow traffic on port 443 for the Service Stack Azure Cloud. This Service Stack holds all Azure Data Center public IPs, which among other things are required by the Azure Bastion service, and for example, also for Azure Backup. And finally, on all your Azure VM subnets in the VNet, you should allow inbound TCP traffic on ports 3389 and 22 for your Azure Bastion subnet IP range. So if you deploy it in advance, the subnet, and you attach an NSG, you should see that all those specific inbound and outbound rules are in place. Otherwise, your deployment will fail. So let me quickly show Azure Bastion. Let me go back to the Azure portal. You can look up Bastion to the global search bar. The nice thing, if you use it over here, you can have direct links to the Microsoft docs. So you can click on them. They will be opened in an extra tab. You can read all about Azure Bastion, for example, in which regions it's available. Let us go back. I also have Bastion from the sidebar. I already set up one. So let us go to a specific VM. Let us say VM v2. You can see that specific VM doesn't have a public IP address. It just has an internal IP address, like you can see over here. To connect to it through Bastion, just also click on Connect, choose Bastion. You can click Use Bastion. It will open, type in the username. Here it is, and my super secret password once again. Just click on Connect, and it will open an extra tab. Connect to that specific VM. And you can do all your management-related tasks on that specific VM directly through the portal without opening anything else. You can even copy text. There's still not a copy of data from files from your desktop to over here. Maybe it will be on the future roadmap. You can also go into full screen, so you can better see what you're doing. Nice thing is, if you're an administrator, you can go back to the Bastion, click on it. Under settings, you can click on sessions, and you will see if there is a session open. This session is open, and if you have the specific RBAC rights, you can also kill that specific session, just delete it. And you can see the user is out of his login, and he needs to reconnect and re-ask connection through the Azure Bastion host. So let us go back to the slides. Let me share them again. So as a final topic of the day, I want to take a look into virtual network service endpoints and Azure Private Link. A virtual network service endpoints provides the identity of your virtual network to an Azure service. Once you enable a service endpoint in your virtual network, you can add a virtual network rule to secure the Azure service resources to your virtual network. It kind of limits the network access to specific subnets and IP addresses. And for this, it uses the Microsoft Azure Backbone network. You should keep in mind that service endpoints only can be used with ARM VNets. So if you still have some ASM VNets deployed, this is not going to work with it. And also good to know is that the service is completely free, so you can use it without any charge of using it. Like I already said, a virtual network service endpoint provides the identity of your virtual network to an Azure service. And this can, for example, be Azure Storage, Azure SQL Database, Azure Key Vault, or Azure App Service. Also, keep in mind that whenever you configure a service endpoint, it can take up to 50 minutes to complete. So it's one of those resources or services you enable that takes some time to set up. Next to service endpoints, you can also use Azure Private Link or Azure Private Links. With Azure Private Link, you can provide private connectivity from a virtual network to an Azure PaaS service, a customer-owned or any Microsoft partner service. It simplifies the network architecture and secures a connection between endpoints in Azure, and this by eliminating data exposure to the public internet. So traffic always remains on the Microsoft network without any public internet access. And you can integrate it with on-premises and peer networks. And in the event of a security incident within your network, only the mapped resource would be accessible. So, for example, you can see it at the picture at the bottom. So you have a compute service, a private endpoint, and over the Microsoft backbone, without going to through the internet, it can, for example, connect to an Azure SQL database. So before closing off, I just want to give you some key takeaways. 5 things I think you should really remember about this session. There are probably some deployment or management tasks that you do often in your Azure environment. If so, try to automate them. It will save you quite a lot of time. These days, you can run a lot of your Azure services on any infrastructure or on any cloud with the use of Azure Arc and the Windows Admin Center. So you can almost run your Azure services from anywhere. Never use a PIP to connect to your EAS VMs. Better is to use a point-to-site VPN, box with JIT enabled, or Azure Bastion. Azure Bastion is a PaaS service that you provision inside any virtual network and which gives you secure and seamless RDP SSH connectivity to your EAS VMs, and this directly from inside the Azure portal over SSL. And finally, use VNet service endpoints and Azure private links to better protect your Azure resources and virtual networks. So it was my session for today. So Dana, are there any questions in the chat?
Not so far, but guys, if you have any questions at all, please do raise your hand or pop them in the chat.
Yep. You can always contact me through my Twitter handle if you have some question afterwards.
Just getting some praise for your session. Not too many questions at the moment. Cool. Andrew says it helps to learn some good habits over bad ones.
There are some easy ways to do things, I always say, but they're not directly the best ways to do things, and definitely not the most secure ways to do things. So you can do a lot of things in Azure, management things, by just click, but yeah, it's better to think a little bit before you do things. And there are a lot of ways to do it in a secure way. So, but yeah, it's still a topic. I even can talk for 3-4 hours if I want, but yeah, I need to cover something within this hour. So I hope I covered some things that people can help.
Definitely. Andrew also says he's looking after a number of devs who are looking at old ways, causing other issues.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Patrick, so we are going to be putting up these slide decks on GitHub in the next few days. So if you want to start that or pop into it next week or so, we'll have these slides up. And
the video's on YouTube, I think.
Yes, and the video is on YouTube as well. So we'll be posting there. I'll send out the link in a bit. And before everyone leaves, we just want to talk a little bit about our Cloud Lunch and Learn Ideathon kickoff tomorrow at 10 a.m. If you guys go, oh, actually, Charles has a question here. Which is the most economical way for a small development team, presumably for Azure?
And for connecting to his VMs or to other Azure services?
Connecting, yeah.
Connecting to the VMs, probably the Azure Bastion is already around 116 euros. And if you split it up in different subnets, you need a Bastion host in every subnet. So prices can go up. So if you have 3 VNets, you need to triple the price by 3. So the easiest way, and I think in the development ways, is to use JIT and then just limit the access on the service for 3-4 hours or something. Or you just use Visual Studio Code or in an Azure DevOps way. There's also some other options. Do it through ARM templates. Yeah, there are a lot of ways to do it. But to connecting two VMs, probably the cheapest and the securest way to do it is a pip in combination with JIT.
And to other Azure services for app services and Azure functions.
Yeah, also you can use Azure Automation for it. Also, if you want to work from with your VMs to those specific services, you can use a private link. And the service endpoints, definitely look into those because they're not expensive to set up, but mostly they're forgotten. And some of the Azure Private Link, for example, is not that old, so it's just released 4 or 5 months, I think. But the nice thing is, from in your VNets where your VMs live in, you can probably you have a mix of an IaaS environment and a PaaS environment. And if you want to connect to your PaaS services from inside your from your VMs, it's better to use a private link. So you go by the Microsoft backbone and not over the internet to something you're also running in the cloud. So definitely look at those.
And Charles is just asking why you did not cover key vaults in today's session.
It was in the previous session.
Yeah, I think it was in the last session as well.
I need to do it in 50 minutes, so that's why.
Charles, you can pop that in at the YouTube one. So before everyone leaves, I'm just going to say the slide up here, we are hosting a series of live sessions tomorrow as a kickoff for our Ideathon in October. So tomorrow, we'll be dedicating the day to deliver sessions related to topics that will help you seamlessly design your cloud solutions and solve real world problems. So please do join us because there's going to be amazing speakers, maybe not with as amazing slides like Wim here, but I promise you it will be very informative. And as for the YouTube links and stuff, I know like always, we always throw a few links at you here. So if you didn't get a chance, please do register to get your resources in the first link there. We will be finding these slides and any learning materials on our GitHub as well. So if you wanted to catch up on any previous sessions about key vaults or anything like that, do come to our YouTube channel and you can refer back to any of the sessions in this series. And our upcoming sessions next week, we also have our 4th and final Power Platform series on Monday. And next Friday, we will be kicking off our governance and automation series. And finally, we'd really appreciate it if you could provide us some feedback at the very last link. It's very short, it'll take you a minute. And thank you so much. I will repost that link for you there.
Thank you everyone for joining, and I'm not going to say it in Elfish, so.
Thanks so much.
If you can read it, you can do it from there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you very much.